There's a very specific type of manga that doesn't quite know what it wants to be. Not because the author lost the plot, but because the author decided to put everything in. Love story, gang war, political corruption, hyper-detailed anatomy that will make you question your own body image. Explicit content that arrives without warning and then disappears from 20 chapters like it never happened. And somewhere in all of that, somewhere buried, under the muscle anatomy and the blood and the earnest melodrama, there is a genuinely good story. That is both the promise and the problem. We're talking about Sun Ken Rock, created by Boichi, the artist who later went on to illustrate Dr. Stone, and who has clearly made a permanent lifestyle choice to draw the most anatomically precise human bodies in the history of the medium. Published in Yonking, completed at 25 volumes. I'll be honest, this was on my TBR for a long time because I kept expecting it to be a shallow excuse for Boichi to show off. I was only partially right. Before we go in, if you're new here, hit subscribe and drop a like. It helps the channel and it's the least you can do while I'll sit here trying to figure out how to talk about a manga that is simultaneously beautiful, gratuitous, heartfelt and completely unhinged. All within the same chapter. So, the premise. Ken Kitano is a Japanese kid with no plan, no job and no real future. The one thing that he has is Yumin, a girl he grew up near, who he is completely, almost delusionally devoted to. When Yumin moves to South Korea to pursue a career in law enforcement, Ken follows her. Not because she asked him to. Not because there's a particular reason, just because that is where she is. And Ken is a man who operates on a very short list of motivations. This is worth sitting with for a second, because Ken's entire arc, everything that happens to him across 25 volumes, flows from this one defining quality. He doesn't want power, he doesn't want money, he wants human. And he wants to protect the people around him. That's it, that's the character. And in a genre full of protagonists with grand ambitions and elaborate revenge schemes, a protagonist who is just stubbornly loyal to a handful of people is actually more interesting than it sounds. He ends up homeless and starving in Seoul until a chance encounter leads him to defend some locals from a street gang. He does this with his bare hands and with a level of casual violence that gets everyone's attention, including Tom, who becomes his right-hand man and best friend. And this is where the story really kicks off. Ken ends up founding and leading the Sun Ken Rock gang, named after himself, almost entirely by accident. Now, here is where I have to acknowledge something. The story is built on a foundation that Boichi commits to completely, but that is also objectively ridiculous. Ken becomes one of the most feared gang bosses in Korea because he is physically indestructible, emotionally simple, and completely impossible to buy or intimidate. The manga knows this is absurd. It leans into it. The comedy beats in the early volumes work precisely because the gap between Ken's emotional naivety and his physical dominance is enormous. He will dismantle an entire gang operation and then stand there wondering if Yumin noticed him. But the series isn't content to stay in that register for long. By the midpoint, Boichi has introduced a corrupted political structure, a villain operating inside the police force, and a web of gang allegiances that becomes generally complex. The tonal shift from earnest delinquent's love story to brutal organized crime thriller is handled with varying levels of success. There are arcs that are genuinely gripping, and there are arcs that drag their feet for 2 volumes before arriving somewhere you already saw coming. The art is the thing that holds all this together. Boichi is doing something unusual here. He draws violence and intimacy with the same level of obsessive detail. Every fight is anatomically committed. You understand exactly what is happening to everybody in every panel. The impact is visceral in a way that very few action manga achieve. He doesn't glorify the violence, he documents it. There's a sequence in the mid-game involving a knife fight in a confined space that I read 3 times because the choreography and the framing are so precise that it reads almost like a movie. The pacing in that sequence is tighter than anything else in the series. The explicit content is the other thing I need to address. Sunken Rock is not subtle about the fact that its male lead is an extremely attractive person who is appreciated by several women throughout the whole series. Boichi draws these sequences with the same anatomical commitment he brings to everything else, which means they are extremely detailed and they arrive at irregular intervals throughout the whole manga. Your tolerance for this will vary, and I want to be upfront about it because it is not incidental. It is baked into the series' identity. The manga is in conversation with its own fan service in a way that is sometimes interesting and sometimes just there. What the series is ultimately about, when you strip everything back, is the cost of choosing loyalty over self-preservation. Ken never calculates. He never hedges. He will walk into a situation that should kill him because someone he cares about needs him to. The manga asks whether that kind of person can actually survive in a world that runs on calculation and compromise. The answer it arrives at is complicated, and the final arc, while not perfectly executed, is earnest enough that I found it genuinely moving in places I did not expect to be moved. The ending has been divisive. I understand why, but I'll say this. It earned its emotional conclusion more than it earned its plot logic, and sometimes that's enough. Reading Sunken Rock is the experience of being on a bus that is mostly going the right direction but cannot decide how fast to drive. Some stretches are effortless. You are turning pages, the rhythm is perfect, the action panels are landing like they should, and then the bus stops. There's a fan service chapter. There's a filler arc. There's a villain who exists primarily to be defeated, and you know it from the moment they appear. And then, without warning, it gets genuinely good again. A character moment lands exactly right, a fight sequence is constructed with real craft. The emotional through line between Ken and Tom reasserts itself and reminds you why you started reading this in the first place. The overall experience is something like, I can see what this could have been, and I can see what it actually is. And both of those things are true at the same time. It doesn't exhaust you the way a relentless dark seinen does, but it also doesn't let you fully relax. It keeps the door open for the next thing to be either a genuine gut punch or a chapter that exists because the manga needed 30 pages this week. You keep reading because Boichi is too talented for the story to ever be boring, and that's almost enough. Ken Kitano is a fascinating protagonist for one specific reason. He is not intelligent, he is not strategic, and he is not morally complex in the way that seinen protagonists usually are. What he is real in his emotions. His love for human is not romanticized in the manga. It's treated as a kind of force of nature that shapes every decision he makes. The manga never asks you to think he's cool for this. It asks you to understand that this is simply who he is. When he does something catastrophically reckless, there's never a moment where you don't understand why. That clarity of motivation is harder to write than it looks. Tom is, for my money, the best character in the series. He is the strategic mind to Ken's blunt instrument. He is also the emotional heart of the series in a way that sneaks up on you. The dynamic between them, where Tom consistently finds himself cleaning up the consequences of Ken's sincerity, is both funny and genuinely affecting. When the manga earns an emotional beat, it's almost always because Tom is in the scene. There's a moment in the later volumes involving Tom's backstory, that I won't spoil, but it reframes this entire arc in a way that made me stop and sit with it. That's writing, specific, patient, and earned. Yumin is the area where I have the most complicated feelings on. She is the engine of the entire story, Ken's reason for everything, but the manga struggles to give her equal dimensionality in return. In the early volumes, she has real agency. She's pursuing a career, she has her own code, she pushes back against Ken's presence in her life, but as the series progresses, and the romantic resolution becomes more central, she flattens somewhat. This is a recurring issue in manga of this genre and era, and Sunken Rock is not immune to it. The antagonists are functional but rarely exceptional. The corrupt police commissioner works as a villain because the manga invests time in showing the systematic damage he causes rather than just his personal menace. The rival gang bosses are more variable. Some have genuine weight, others feel like obstacles with names. The series is at its best when it's focused on the human cost of violence rather than the performance of it. My rating is 7.8 out of 10. The 08 is doing significant work here. This is a manga that is very good at being several things simultaneously and not quite excellent at being any one of them, which is a different kind of failure from being mediocre. And I want to make the distinction clearly. What it does exceptionally well is the art. Boichi is operating at a level that very few action manga artists reach. The body mechanics, the panel composition, the way violence is choreographed with real spatial logic, this is the craft that should be studied. The central friendship, Ken and Tom, are one of the better written male friendships in the genre. Their dynamic carries the emotional weight of the series more reliable than the romantic plotline does. And the tonal range, Sunken Rock, can be genuinely funny, genuinely brutal and genuinely tender within the same volume. That range is hard to execute without whiplash, and Boichi mostly pulls it off. What I hold against it is the pacing in the middle act. There are arc-long stretches that feel like the manga is clearing the board between major story beats rather than building toward anything. You can feel the episodic publication schedule in a way that shouldn't be this visible. And the female characterization, human specifically, deserve more consistent dimensionality across the full run. The series is clearly capable of writing women well, it just doesn't always. Read this if you want exceptional action art, a protagonist who is refreshingly uncomplicated, and a gang story with genuine emotional stakes buried under the spectacle. Read it if you can handle explicit content woven through your crime drama without warning. Skip it if you need consistent pacing, and you have no patience for fanservice. Skip it if you require your protagonists to be strategically intelligent. Skip it if you are looking for the seinen equivalent of Berserk and don't want to be surprised by a comedy chapter in the middle of the war arc. It's a manga that will stay with you because Boichi is too talented for it not to. Even when the story fails to match the art. You'll remember specific panels, you'll remember Tom, you'll remember the fight sequences that made you stop and reread the page layout. Whether that's a recommendation or an apology depends on what you came here for. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, you've now spent more time thinking about Ken's motivations than most people spend thinking about their own. I respect that. The question I want to leave you in the comments: Tom or Ken? Who actually carries this story? I've given you my answer across this review. I want to know if you disagree or agree. Drop it below. If this kind of deep dive is your thing, subscribe and like the video. It's the most direct way to tell the algorithm this content is worth surfacing. And if you have a title you think I should review next, put it in the comments. I can't promise I'll get to it fast, but I'll get to it. I'm Jan and see you in the next one.